Sato has been out for a while now, and odds are you've probably already beat the final boss at least once, but for some of you, you may still be struggling on the final boss and having to start from the very bottom floor and go up 30 floors just to get there again, and all of that just to die again because you don't exactly know how to beat the final boss. That's why I made this video, that you'll know what you're going into, what to expect, and how to beat the final boss without losing any of your lives. Before we jump in, I do want to talk about Pearl upgrades. You can go to Marina and she will give you some permanent upgrades you can use for the tower. These are very important, and of course this will work to help you not lose any lives and beat the final boss, but it's going to be a lot harder if you are not using any permanent upgrades, such as more lives, damage reduction, and of course when your shields are broken, being able to launch yourself into the air. Now, saying that, let's say you lost some lives when you're going up the tower and you only have one left, if you make a small mistake and you get some trouble with the final boss, you get distracted, you could lose your life and have to start all the way over. So I would say make sure to get some damage reductions so you can't just get too hit by the weakest enemy, and make sure to get extra lives, and of course the most important one, which is having that ability to be thrown up in the air when your shields are broken. To start off, the final boss's first stage isn't that difficult. You only have to bust 2 of the bulb tentacles that it puts out, and it doesn't really spawn a lot of enemies, so the first stage doesn't need much coaching other than, try to avoid the enemies just as you normally would and break the bulbs, and of course then go and attack the boss. And it does spit out some black ink, but it doesn't do a lot of damage, and it's not exactly super difficult on the first stage. So that stage is not super difficult, but just make sure you dodge whenever it does attack. The second stage of the final boss is a lot more difficult, whereas now the tentacles are moving and there are 3 of them. They're still up on the main platform near the boss, so try to stay far away from the boss, that way you don't get hit. But also make sure that you don't get surrounded by enemies. Well, this is the main reason I have died on that floor and had to restart or lose a life, is getting surrounded by enemies. Make sure you put enough ink down for yourself, and make sure that you have ink all around you to escape on. If you don't have any ink below you and you're just standing at enemy ink, or you only have a slight bit of ink below you that's yours, you're going to have trouble getting away from enemies when they're all around you. Just make sure not to get hit by the final boss's new attacks, because it does introduce some new ones, such as the Super Chump attack. Once you've broken all of the tentacle bulbs around the boss and got down its barrier, you'll have to take down the boss's health by spotting it with your ink. This is not extremely difficult, but it does have the new attacks, such as using the Killer Whale, which is basically 3 lasers it shoots at you. This is probably the most powerful attack that it has, and to avoid this one, you want to go around the boss by swimming around it. Don't let yourself get stuck, because if you get stuck, those lasers are just going to destroy you, and you most likely will lose a life, or lose all of your lives and then have to go back to the very bottom. Just make sure you go all the way around the boss, just spiral around it, spotting it, and make sure you don't get surrounded. The main thing is just making sure to go around. If you don't go around, you'll get stuck in one spot, and most likely the boss will spit out more enemies around you, or it'll use one of its attacks to destroy you. The third stage of the boss is by far the hardest stage, and is going to require some different techniques to beat. The first technique is going to be breaking the bulb closest to the boss. It will spawn bulbs all around it, but most of those are going to be on the outer part of the stage. You definitely want to take out the ones closest to the boss first and as fast as possible before you start getting surrounded. If you can take out the one in the middle closest to the boss, you're going to be in a lot better situation than waiting till last to take that on out, because it does get more difficult the more bulbs you break. So first take out that one closest to the boss, and then go into this new technique, which I call the spiral technique. You want to go around the outer edges of the stage and get your ink down, that way you can continue spiraling around. If you spiral around, the enemies will follow you, and you'll be able to stay ahead of them if you have fast enough swim speed, which of course I'm assuming you do get enough chips for this kind of stuff. If you want a video on what chips you should get for going up the tower, make sure to comment below if you want that, and I will make that one as well. But what you want to do is spiral around and make sure you can outlast those enemies. The boss has a lot more attacks on the third stage, such as the Reef Slider attack, which basically it shoots a lot of reef sliders at you, and you do not want to stop moving or it will completely bombard you with them and you will definitely be splatted. Another thing I want to talk about is the jump panels on the sides of the stage. As you're spiraling around, you will see these jump pads as well as ink lines you can ink and get higher into the air. You can use your Pearl drone and pull that out at any time, So I actually forgot to do this on my first run and still beat the final boss with just using the spiral technique, but it is much easier to beat it if you use the technique of these jump panels. If you use them and then jump into the air very high and use your pearl drone, you're able to scout out all of the areas and avoid a lot of the attacks, and as well as this, get your shields back if you're low on shields. If you're low on shields and have taken damage, definitely find one of these jump pads. I believe there's 2 on the stage, but there could possibly be 4. You want to definitely find these and jump into the air and spin around while in the air. This is going to protect you from a lot of attacks, and it's going to help you get your shields back before you hit the ground and go back into fighting the boss. As you're spiraling around the final boss, dodging attacks and making sure your shield doesn't get down, you of course will have to take out the outer bulb tentacles that are around the stage to of course get the barrier down and finally attack the final boss. Now to do this, you want to continue your spiraling technique, but every once in a while when you do get near a bulb, make sure to shoot it, and of course if you're taking out the enemies behind you, you won't have too many enemies around you and you'll be able to take out these bulbs pretty easily until you get to the final one. For some reason, the final bulb that you have to break spits out enemies like basically constantly and is extremely difficult to beat. It took me many tries to get this, and basically you want to use the same technique, which is the spiral technique. But for this final bulb, if you are having trouble getting it and you can't defeat the enemies fast enough, or you didn't get the right color chips and your attack damage is just not high enough, what you can do is attack enemies slowly while still spiraling until you get enough of the discs that Pearl can use to launch her super attack. This will blow all the enemies off the stage and of course freeze the bulbs from spawning enemies. Once you do that, you need to go up to the bulb and attack it with everything you have, and of course using your specials. Now there are some specials that are better than others for destroying the bulbs, and of course the top 3 in my list would be Booyah Bomb, Triple Ink Strike, and Reef Slider. I used Reef Slider both of the times that I did it, and it did really well. So I think that, in my opinion, Reef Slider is really good, but those 3 specials are the ones you want to get. If you have something like the Wave Breaker, it's not going to hit the bulb, and at least when I used it, it did not hit the bulb and do any damage. So I don't think the Wave Breaker can actually do that, though the Wave Breaker is a good special for actually doing just regular courses. For the final boss, I would definitely say getting one of the 3 specials, which is Booyah Bomb, Triple Ink Strike, or getting Reef Slider. Now that the final boss has finally got its barrier down and you can start attacking it, do not just go up and start spraying it with your weapon. This is a very bad idea. What you want to do is continue using the spiral technique, and this does seem like a very cowardly technique, but if you want to beat the final boss, this is the way to do it. Of course, you can't get it from very far away unless you have something like a curling bomb. As for a sub weapon, I would try to get something that's long range, such as a curling bomb or a splat bomb. But of course, those are going to take a very long time to beat the boss if you're just using those. I actually on my first run just used curling bombs pretty much the entire time, and it did take me a good 30 minutes to get past that final stage. So you definitely don't want to do that unless you're willing to spend the time. But the second time I went through the final boss, I made sure to use a different technique, which is cutting through the middle. Now the final boss's attacks are going to be happening over and over again, and you got to make sure to look out for the most powerful ones. But you can definitely get an opening after it uses one of its attacks and go through the middle and spray it. Make sure not to stay in the middle too long or go into the middle whenever there's a bunch of enemies there, otherwise you will get surrounded and get stuck. The best way to do this is to use the jump pads on the side, get up high, and then go around to one of the sides of the boss that doesn't have a lot of enemies and spray it from there. But of course, once it starts its next attack and it's going to use one of its very powerful specials, you want to continue spiraling around after you cut through the middle enough times. And of course, using Booyah Bombs is really good because you can hit it from far away, and using your subs and specials to hit it while spiraling around, eventually you will take down the final stage of the boss. Spoiler alert, there is a 4th stage. The 4th stage is extremely easy, and basically what happens is all your color chips get taken away. The boss doesn't spit out too many enemies or use too powerful attacks. What you want to do is go directly to the bulbs, break them, and you'll get a ton of color chips. Once you break all these bulbs and make sure you don't get surrounded by enemies, you'll basically be extremely powerful, and the shields will come down on the boss. Just go up to it and spray it with your weapon. It really can't do much against you, and of course, Once you do that, you will also get a special that Pearl will use and basically just obliterates the boss. Like I said, this is just for cinematicness. It's just to make the final boss fun, but that's totally okay, and we love to have cinematicness in Splatoon. But after that, the final boss will be defeated, and you will finally have beaten the tower. Make sure to comment down below anything that you found helpful with the final boss. Make sure to let me know if you want a color chip tutorial video. And of course, make sure to like and subscribe for more future Splatoon content. Thank you guys so much for watching, and I'll catch you all on the next one. Later, guys.